הרביעית על הרביעית.
אדון עולם, אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, ליד נשא בחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא. אדון עולם, אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, בחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא. ואחרי ככלות הכל, לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ויש שני, להמשיל לו להכבירה, בלי ראשית בלי תכלית, לא העוז והמשרה. והוא אלי וחי גולי וצור חבלי ויצרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ליום אקרא. בידו אפקיד רוחי ויעשי שם ויעירה ויברוכי.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to ScholarStream, a collaboration of the broader conservative movement to bring learning to the Jewish people. My name is Alex Friedman, and I am a current second-year rabbinical student, though not for long, third year is coming, at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I will be acting as moderator and tech support for this evening's session. We join together this evening as we enter into Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, for those who have given their lives in her defense. This is the first session in our 7th series, which is entitled Liturgy of Resilience. Our session tonight is called I Shall Not Fear, Liturgy, Emotional Honesty, and Resilience. Series 8, called Israel, Models of Resilience, will be starting next week and running concurrently with this series. You'll receive and have received more information about that in your inbox tomorrow. Tonight's session will run about an hour. Our presenter, who I will introduce in just a moment, will pause for questions. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them to me, and only to me, so that our presenter can focus on teaching. And we will get to as many questions as we can, though I can't promise we will get to all of them. Speaking of the chat, I will share a link to the source page for tonight there in just a moment. And at the end of the session, I will send out a brief feedback form so we can learn how to make each session even better. Tonight's session will have automatically generated captions, which can be accessed by clicking a button at the bottom of the screen entitled Live Transcript, or under Settings. Feel free to ask me if you need any help. Keep in mind, I'm sure you noticed this if your captions were on while we were listening to Adon Olam. Our transcript robot has not yet been to JTS, so some of the transcription of Hebrew might be a little bit strange. Oh, how odd. Okay. Apologies for that. Now, about our presenter. Rabbi Jan Uhrbach is acting dean of the Rabbinical School and H.L. Miller Cantorial School at the Jewish Theological Seminary and founding director of the Bloch-Kochler Center for Spiritual Arts. Through her work as director of the Bloch-Kochler Center for Spiritual Arts, she has developed and overseen programs and discussions, as well as prayer services on Shabbat and festivals for the JTS community and general public. In addition to her role at JTS, Rabbi Uhrbach serves as the founding rabbi of the Conservative Synagogue of the Hamptons in Bridgehampton, Long Island. She has played a key role in the acclaimed Lev Shalem prayer book series as associate editor of Siddur Lev Shalem, the Shabbat and Festival Siddur, published by the Rabbinical Assembly in 2016. She also served on the editorial committee for Machzor Lev Shalem, some of the best publications of the RA, in my humble opinion. Without further ado, Rabbi Uhrbach.
Thank you, Alex. And welcome, everybody. It's great to see you. I want to start with a line from the High Holy Day service that many of us are probably familiar with. Uteshuva utfila utzedaka, mavirin et ro'ah hagzera, from the Unatana Tokef on the High Holy Days. Tshuva, the process of repentance, return, and tefillah, prayer, and tzedakah, either giving or acts of justice, ameliorate, mavirin et ro'ah hagzera, ameliorate the severity of the decree. So what does this mean? I would suggest it doesn't mean that if one engages in tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah, nothing bad will ever happen to you, right? We don't believe in magic talismans, and prayer and tshuva and giving tzedakah don't prevent bad things from happening. We know that. Rather, I think these are practices that our tradition teach ameliorate our experience of the decree, quote, when it comes. When bad things happen, these things will have built up resources and strength for us to bear it, to move forward, to respond. In other words, what I think the liturgy on these High Holy Days is saying is tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah build resilience. Those three things. So our focus is, how does tefillah, how does prayer contribute to resilience? And to open, I want to think, first of all, what do we mean by resilience, which I think is very different from comfort. Very often when we think about what prayer offers in difficult times, we think that prayer offers comfort, and hopefully it does, at least sometimes. But if we think about what builds resilience, and think, for example, about parenting, how does a parent raise resilient children? That doesn't happen by sparing children from anything that is challenging or uncomfortable or difficult, or offering comfort all the time, or stepping in to fix things. Right? Resilience is built by creating enough comfort for a person to face challenging things. And I want to suggest, and this may be a little bit counterintuitive for some of us, that prayer and liturgy do that too. When prayer works, it gives us enough comfort to face challenging things. And in doing so, it builds resilience. So just to give an overview of how I want to address this, because we're opening this series tonight on Liturgy of Resilience, I want to talk about the way that prayer, and especially, but not only, communal prayer with an established liturgy, can build resilience. And I want to address it on three different levels in this order. First, I want to think about the broader prayer context, the enterprise of prayer, so to speak, and the way in which the sort of the things that surround communal prayer themselves build resilience. Second, I want to talk a little bit about the prayer experience, the act of prayer, and how that builds resilience. And then in the last part of our time together, I want to look at the specific content of the liturgy itself and a few examples where I see in the liturgy some of the things that I want to talk about playing out. I know that in the remaining 3 sessions after this, you'll have more opportunity to dig into specific liturgy. So let's take them in that order. So first, this broader context of prayer. And some of the things I'm going to say in this context aren't necessarily specific to prayer. We can find them in other ways, but it's worth thinking about how they play out in a prayer life. So one thing is the simple fact of having a discipline. The routine and the regularity of a prayer life can provide structure that can carry us through in difficult times. Structure helps. When we're under stress, when we're going through loss, when we're anxious, having structure, and particularly structure at liminal moments that give a rhythm to the day. I know when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to do X, and before I go to sleep at night, I'm going to do Y, and my day is going to be framed by this opportunity that prayer offers. And what is it an opportunity for? In part, introspection, which takes us going back to Natana Tokef, to that teshuva utefila utzedakah, right? The work on oneself builds resilience. If I engage regularly in prayer and I look at and I'm present to myself, I become aware that I'm a person who grows and changes. And that reminds me, I will continue to grow and change. And I may have resources, inner resources that I don't yet have. I can develop them. There's hope for me to do that. So having a set time for that introspection is powerful. Beyond that, prayer offers a very particular, unique way to engage in community. And I think that one of the most profound lessons that has come out of this time of COVID is how much we need community and how important community is to our sense of hope and our ability to maintain our energy and our resilience. Now, community, like many other things, can be found in lots of different ways. And there are many different activities that people engage in that can serve this function. Soul Cycle is a kind of community, right? But I do think that there is something very unique about prayer communities. Because when we come together in community with other people who pray, we have a deep experience with people who we might never have become friends with, who may actually we don't have all that much in common with. And yet we share something that is very deep and very real. And it's a different kind of companionship that we find in other aspects of our lives. It's a companionship in an enterprise of, as we'll talk about later, confronting truth. I want to say that's very rare in our world. And being a part of a community that is invested in that builds a kind of strength for us to do that as ourselves alone. And also, a prayer community exposes us regularly to the full cycle of life with all its ups and downs. When I pray regularly in a community, someone is always celebrating and someone is always grieving. And someone has just had a diagnosis and someone else has just been cured or healed. And someone has a birth in the family and somebody has an engagement. And the ups and downs of my own life are contextualized in this broader context. I think probably the most salient example of this is the Shiva Minyan. I read an article once by Saul Seidlinger about comparing a Shiva Minyan to a support group, right? And what is a Shiva Minyan? Shiva Minyan or a daily minyan when you're saying Kaddish. You go every day and you encounter people, some of whom are not grieving, and many of whom are. And some of them are further along in the process. And some of them are newer than you are. And the grief is fresher. Right. And we become aware that I'm not being singled out for this suffering. This is part of the human condition. And that context helps me bear it. And maybe I see role models. That person had a loss that maybe was more shocking or a bigger loss in their lives than mine. And they're putting one foot in front of the other and getting through the day. And not only that, but sometimes I have a role in comforting them. Right? I'm not helpless or purposeless in my loss. I can harness it in empathy for someone else. I can share part of my own journey and comfort someone else. And that's just an example of loss, right? Prayer communities embrace the full experience of life. And they convey to us when we participate, when it works well, that I'm needed, I'm counted on. And that also helps me build resilience. So that's sort of in the broadest sense, right? And much of that, as I said, applies to other kinds of contexts, but it's worth noting that that's something that praying in a communal setting offers. So let's turn to part two, the prayer experience itself. How does the act of praying build resilience? So I titled this session, "I Shall Not Fear," which is a quote from Adon Olam, which I'm hoping we'll get to later. And the subtitle is Liturgy, Emotional Honesty, and Resilience. So the liturgy, the words matter, and we'll get to that. But at another level, when we pray, the words are just the container. They're the context, they're the goad that allows prayer to happen. And prayer itself may or may not involve words. What it should always involve is honesty. And one way to think of prayer is that it's a regular practice of confronting and articulating truth, of being fully honest with oneself, to oneself, and doing it in the presence of God. And I want to suggest that emotional honesty and facing truth is one of the most important tools that we have in building resilience. I'm going to read to you one of my favorite poems on this point. This is a poem that we put in the Machzor on the page just before we chant Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur. And I read it every year aloud. I know there are some members of my congregation here, so you know this. I read it every year aloud as part of the service, and every year it makes me cry when I read it. But here's the poem. It's by Merle Feld. I am grateful for this, a moment of truth. Grateful to stand before you in judgment. You know me as a liar, and I am flooded with relief to have my darkest self exposed at last. Every day I break my vows to be the dutiful child, selfless parent, caring friend, responsible citizen of the world. No one sees, no one knows how often I take the easy way. I let myself off the hook, give myself the benefit of the doubt every day. Every day. On this day, this one day, I stand before you naked, without disguise, without embellishment, naked, shivering, ridiculous. I implore you, let me try again. That's the poem. And I think this poem expresses so much about what we need to be resilient and the way that prayer helps us do that. I love the line, I am flooded with relief to have my darkest self exposed at last. It is a relief to be honest with ourselves, to be able to say exactly what is going on. And it is necessary to do that in order to be able to honestly ask, let me try again. And at the core of resilience is really a prayer, let me try again. I've tried and I've failed. I want to try again. I've taken a step and I've fallen. I need to get up again. I had hopes and I was disappointed. I need to hope again. That's what resilience is. I want to do it again. I want another shot. I want the world to have another shot. I need the sustenance to keep going again. And core to that is the willingness to say, this is where I am. This is what has happened. This is what I've done. This is what I'm struggling with. Maybe it's not guilt, right? This is a Yom Kippur poem, right? Could be any number of things that we need to confront honestly in our prayer. So the emotional honesty of prayer can involve articulating and naming our deepest fears and anxieties, or in the poem, our guilt, our sense of inadequacy, our sense perhaps of hopelessness or helplessness. I don't know if I can deal with what I'm facing. I need help. And it is always easier to face the things that we can name. Until I can name my feeling of helplessness, it's hard to ask for help. Right? So, and by the way, the honesty of prayer may involve articulating hope, which is, of course, also essential to resilience. And while that may sound easy, I want to suggest it's not as easy as it sounds. To put our hope into words, to name our hopes, is a risk, because I might be disappointed. I might feel foolish. I might, some of us think, give it a kanahara, right? There's a vulnerability in saying, this is what I hope for. This is what I yearn for. What if I express a need and it's not met? Right? It's hard. I think especially in this world, sometimes it's very hard to express hope because we could sound to ourselves like we're idiots. Right? Like, do I not see what's going on in the world? How can I say I'm an optimist given this world? Prayer is a context in which we can allow ourselves to express those hopes. And it requires letting down certain defenses. Now, when I speak of honesty in prayer, and especially emotional honesty, that may sound like I'm speaking only about praying in our own words, pouring forth our hearts, right? And expressing ourselves before God. And prayer definitely includes that. And it's hugely important. It's very valuable. And I hope that our prayer lives include time to put the book down and simply talk to God in our own words. Or simply experience presence and say nothing. That's important too, right? It's essential. And it's essential to resilience, because if we carry around unsaid too many things that we're afraid to say, the weight of them, whether we are conscious of them or not, will wear away our reserves. It takes energy not to feel things. It takes energy to block them out, not to think things. It's exhausting. And so the mere act of pouring forth what we've been holding onto inside and not saying can give us a kind of rest, an opportunity to build our strength back, to build back our resilience. But I want to suggest that it's not only prayer in our own words that can do this for us. The traditional liturgy can also serve this function. And sometimes it does it better. Why is that? Because we don't always know what we want and need to say. We don't always know what we're really feeling. And I think the liturgy is extraordinarily good at articulating the complexities and contradictions of the human heart and mind and soul, and helping us hold them, calling our attention to them, making us notice, and giving words to them. It can be a relief to know that the full burden of expression doesn't rest on me. Right? Like when you read a gorgeous line of poetry or in a novel that is beautifully written, and you read it and you say, oh, yes, that's what I've been wanting to say. And the liturgy can do that for us. And sometimes there are things that are hard to feel until the liturgy pushes us to articulate them. And the feeling follows the expression, not the other way around. Gratitude can be like that. I wake up in the morning, and what I feel immediately is aches and pains. Or I pick up my phone and I see something horrible in the news that terrifies me or infuriates me, or a list of 20 emails that I now have to respond to that weren't on my list of things to do, and I'm suddenly overwhelmed. And then I pick up the Siddur, and the words articulate things that I should be grateful for. And I hear myself say them, and I hear them coming out of my mouth. And I say, you know what? That's right. The sun rose this morning, and I'm here to see it. And look at all these resources that I have at my disposal. And I'm putting on clothing. I have clothing. How wonderful is that? And we start to feel the gratitude that the liturgy is pushing us to feel. And hope can be that way too. I may not feel hopeful. And then I hear myself saying words of hope. And sometimes the feeling follows. I will also say that praying someone else's words, and especially ancient words, right? We read the words of this prayer book and they go back, in some cases, thousands of years, conveys the sense that what we are experiencing in our own lives is not unprecedented, and that our responses and feelings to our experiences are shared by others. The liturgy gives us community and companionship across not only space, but time. I am not alone. We find this especially, but not only in Psalms. I want to affirm that there is nothing that we are experiencing in our time that the psalmist has not experienced. Different context, it looks different, it's the same thing. We've been here before, and we've survived. And I want to just offer, this is one of the reasons, a particular pet peeve of mine. I know Alex has heard this because we've been in class together. But one of my particular pet peeves about liturgy is we have a tendency now, whenever there's a natural disaster or an act of violence, everybody rushes and writes a prayer specific to this moment. There's a shooting and we write a prayer. There's a tsunami and we write a prayer. And I want to say that it kind of undermines the way liturgy functions. Because the message when we do that is that there is nothing in our prayer book that responds to this moment, because this moment is completely new and unprecedented, and no one has ever survived anything like this before. And the point of liturgy and the function of the Psalms is to say, no, we are not the first generation to live through violent times. We are not the first generation to live through anti-Semitism. We are not the first generation to look at horrific storms and see the havoc that a hurricane can bring. We've been here before, and we've survived, and we have words to say. There is no emotion that a human being can experience that we are feeling that the psalmist hasn't felt. And I would hazard a guess that there are no questions or doubts about God, no crises of meaning that aren't somewhere there in the Psalms too. And here, paradoxically, I think the traditional liturgy may actually be more freeing to us in expressing our true feelings about God and the way God functions in the world than we, left to our own devices, would allow ourselves to say. There are things that we might be scared to say. And then we look in the Psalms and lo and behold, there it is. All the doubts and the questions and the anger, the feeling of abandonment, it's all there. And all the ways in which we are inconsistent in what we believe. There's a wonderful book called The Cloister Walk by somebody named Kathleen Norris, recounting her year in a Benedictine monastery with a daily practice of reciting Psalms. And she quotes a British Benedictine by the name of Sebastian Moore, who says, God behaves in the Psalms in ways he is not allowed to behave in systematic theology. I love that, right? When we sit and think about what we want to believe about God, we don't allow ourselves to think about God behaving in certain ways, and we don't allow all the contradictions. We try to be systematic. In prayer, we can allow it all. And so I think the liturgy as a whole, especially but not only the Psalms, encourages us not to get sort of dressed up in presenting ourselves to God, but to appear, in Merle Feld's language, fully naked, or exactly as we are, in all the messiness of life and all the messiness of our own hearts and souls and our minds, to just show up and be real. All of which can be scary and hard. And that takes us back to how parents raise resilient children, providing a safe enough context in which to take risks. Prayer is that context in which we can risk the truth. It offers comfort, yes, but also this challenge of radical honesty. And regular prayer practice builds the sense within us that there's nothing that I can't admit to myself. There is no part of me, there is nothing in my world that I can't honestly hold and say in the presence of God and be okay. That's the main thing. And then a few other points I want to make, and then maybe I'll stop for a few questions. What else about the experience of prayer, in addition to this emotional radical honesty, helps build resilience? One other big piece of it that I want to highlight is simply the connection with something larger than me. Whatever our theology, however we imagine God, the act of prayer is an assertion, and hopefully we're rewarded with the experience of feeling that I am part of something bigger than me. I'm connected to something. And the moment that I assert that and hopefully have even just a flash of an inkling of a moment of feeling it, there's profound comfort and strength that enables me to go on, because I am not alone in my battles. The burden of doing this is not falling only on me. I am part of something. I am less lonely, and I can draw on the strength of whether I envision it as the community or a collective unconscious or an impulse for good in the world, or whatever my theology and my metaphor or vision of God allows me to do. I can call on that for help. And this, I think, I'll speak very, very personally for me in terms of my resilience, being able to locate my own sadness, grief, pain, anxiety within God's. I am experiencing outrage or sadness or grief, not only because what may be happening in my world that I have to confront is an affront to me and my safety or my belief or what I care about, but because I firmly believe that it's an affront to a goodness that I assert in the world. And the moment that I connect my anxiety and my fear and my loss or grief or sadness to what I call God's, to a sense of divine pain, it's not just me suffering here. I'm feeling God's suffering. That gives me a lot of strength to hold it and to try to do something about it. Because it's not just little me, right? What I'm feeling is an affront to goodness in the world, and that helps me build resilience. That's the second thing. The third thing I think that prayer, experience prayer offers that builds resilience is simply the sense of being heard. That there is something, someone listening. And if I speak, I affirm I am being heard. Plain and simple. How? I don't know. By whom? I'm not sure. I'm being heard. Deeply heard. Many people, maybe some of us, rarely have the experience of really being heard. Prayer is that. And then the fourth thing, which I've already alluded to, the articulation of gratitude and blessing, which is easy to forget. And the last thing, prayer is an opportunity to articulate the vision I am working toward. And that's also important to resilience, because in difficult times, we can forget. We can get so pulled, our focus in this disaster and that outrage or our busyness, that we forget what we actually care about, the big picture. Prayer is about lifting our sights and saying, oh, these are the things I really care about. There was a student at JTS a couple of years ago who in a class of mine said, when I pray, I think of myself as voting for the vision in the book. I'm casting my vote for this, right? That's what prayer may be about. So I want to make sure we cover at least some of the particular liturgies. So so let me share the screen and and now go to just one particular prayer, which is actually in a traditionally the very first thing we would say in the morning. This one actually is not in your packet, but I'm going to share the screen and just show it to you. It's very, very brief. It's one of my favorite lines of liturgy. So can you see this here at the top of the page? This is the first thing that we would say in the morning. Modeh or moda ani lefanecha. I thank or acknowledge before you, God, implied. Melech havekayam, living and eternal sovereign. Shechazarta binishmati bechemla, who has returned my soul to me in your kindness. Rabba emunatecha, great is your faithfulness. So what does this have to do with resilience? First of all, first thing we say in the morning, the very first thing we say, I am grateful. First words out of our mouth. We wake up and the first thing we say, I am grateful before you. I acknowledge that there is something or someone living, vital, and enduring beyond me. Chai v'kayam. Alive, vital, chai, kayam, enduring. Who has returned my soul to me. I've been given the gift of a new day. What a blessing. I have the new start that Milfeld's poem talked about. I get to try again today. It's a fresh start. And then, most amazingly, Rabba emunatecha, how great is your faithfulness? There is something in the universe. There is a God that I can rely on. Something that I can have faith in, however I articulate that. But then what I most love about this is there's an ambiguity here, because Rabba emunatecha could mean great is your faithfulness, in the sense that you are faithful to give me back my soul after I turn it over to you in sleep, right? And I relied on you, you gave it back to me, I have a new day, and I can rely on you. But it could also mean, great is your faith, meaning, great is your faith in me. The fact that I've woken up this morning means that you, God, trust me with a soul and another day of life. And what is resilience? Resilience entails faith in myself. I can endure this. I can do this. I'm worthy of doing this. And we begin the morning by affirming that God believes in us. What an amazing way to begin the day. If we hold that all day, we would have a lot of resilience indeed. So I would love to get to Adon Olam. So maybe we'll save the last 5 minutes for Adon Olam. There was more I wanted to do I didn't get to it, but if there are questions, I want to make sure to bring some of those out. So I'll pause. And Alex, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. And I wish I could bottle. I imagine I speak for a lot of people here. I wish I could bottle how I'm feeling right now about prayer. This is fabulous. We have a couple of, this is fairly common. We have folks asking the same kinds of questions, so folks will forgive me if I combine them. Stuart and Fran are concerned about the fact that many of us don't really understand Hebrew, which is the primary language of a lot of our traditional liturgy. And they're wondering what it is we do with that when it comes to all of these discussions about prayer language and prayer being a container and all of that. What do we do with the fact that many of us don't have access to that language?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's wonderful to pray in the original Hebrew. I don't want to diminish the beauty of that and the power of it. But good translations are good translations. One can pray in English. There's no obligation to pray in Hebrew. And in fact, for the core of our prayers, we're supposed to pray in the language that we understand. So on the one hand, it's terrific to study and learn. And I do want to suggest that if you care a lot about prayer, in a short time, you can learn enough vocabulary to make sense of a fair amount of the prayers. You don't have to parse every grammatical nuance, but to get key words like kadosh, holy, and melech, sovereign, and chai, alive, right? I mean, a vocabulary of 50 words would get you pretty far. And I also want to say that I am a really big believer in praying, if you don't read Hebrew, in praying in transliteration. Because here, having the words in your mouth, it's not just about what they mean. It's about their ancientness. It's about the feel in the mouth. That matters. So if the Hebrew isn't accessible, use the transliteration and read the translation. And then invest some time in studying, right? I mean, there are lots of wonderful courses in the liturgy now that can help us access the meaning of some of the prayers, and do it slowly. Learn a little. I mean, the prayer book is overwhelming. We don't have to tackle the whole prayer book. For example, one could read a psalm a day and read it in the English and really get into it. And particularly in Lev Shalem, we have commentary in the margin that can help. But I do want to emphasize that both are important. The praying using the liturgy and praying in our own words, they both matter in different ways. So I hope that's at least a little bit helpful. Maybe one or two more.
Here's an easy one. So Marcia asks a question I think a few folks have asked in different ways, which is one of the themes of your presentation so far has been about prayer as honesty, and about a radical honesty. And some folks feel that honestly, they either find the existence of a deity who will respond to what they request or who exists in any meaningful way not believable, or not believable all the time. And they're wondering what in the world they're supposed to do with this inheritance of the Siddur.
Yeah. So I was expecting and hoping that question would come, because I think that's a natural one. So a few things to say about that. One is one way to pray the traditional liturgy honestly is to be constantly checking what one really believes as one goes through the liturgy. Right? And to use the liturgy as a probe of the soul and of the heart and mind. What do I really believe? And interrogate our beliefs and let the liturgy do that. What rubs me the wrong way and why? And when I say I don't really believe in, a God, what do I mean by the God I don't believe in? What do I believe in? And how might I say it? And so that's one way to do it. I personally do also give myself permission, and if you need it, I want to give you permission to refuse to say any portion of the liturgy. Right? I mean, it is a legitimate exercise of prayer to say, I'm sorry, no, I can't affirm that right now. I'm not saying it. Elie Wiesel wrote very beautifully about that, about, praying after the Holocaust. How do we say, Ahava Rabbah, with great love, you have loved us, right? And one strategy that he offers is refuse to say it, as long as you keep it an active refusal. And certainly there are times in life when it may be impossible to offer praise. I can't do it right now. But that's also an act of honesty. And if the liturgy, I personally believe, and I would say this especially of the Psalms, if we go through enough of the liturgy, what we find is a whole variety of beliefs, including, as I said, doubts. Right. And so the liturgy can move us through moments of belief and moments of doubt, moments of love and gratitude, moments of anger and pain. And I don't know that honesty requires consistency. Honesty requires checking in with, where am I right now? And is the first thing that comes up for me right now the most honest stance? Or is there perhaps something deeper that the liturgy might push me into? And it may be that if I sit with it long enough, it's possible I might say, no, this isn't honestly where I am. Or it's possible I might say, actually, I can honestly go there. The last approach I would offer is to read it in such a way that you can read it honestly. Translate it, interpret it. You may read the word God, and God may be off-putting to you. Substitute in your own head what works. A force for good, a collective unconsciousness, the collective goodness in humanity. Whatever it is that will work for you as a metaphor, substitute it for yourself. Read it. I say this all the time. Liturgy is poetry. Prayer is poetry. It's not prose, right? So read it in a way that it's honest for you. It's a hard question. And it's a hard stance to be in. I know that. I don't want to offer facile answers because there aren't any. Prayer is hard. And sometimes the most honest thing we can offer is, I'm feeling disconnected and it's hard to pray. Or I'm really struggling with faith and it's hard to have hope. And sometimes just articulating that opens something. One stance of prayer is, God, I'm really not sure I believe that you're there. And in fact, I probably think you're not. And that I'm an idiot for saying this and I don't even know what I'm saying. But on some deep level, I wish I could believe. And if you're there, and if you are real, I need a little help. Connect, please, because I'm having trouble. That's a legitimate prayer. So I do want to make sure that we look at a couple of pieces of liturgy here. So there are two that I want to call to our attention. One, and both of them hold particular tensions that I think are really powerful in prayer. So one of them, and we're going to do them quickly, and I commend them to you to spend time with, and I'll do them really mostly in English. So I'm going to share the screen again. And this is in your packet. If you'd rather look there, it's on pages 105 and 106. And this is from the daily morning liturgy, every day. And note that it begins with an injunction that one should always acknowledge truth and speak truth in one's heart. And then it goes on to say, here's what we should declare every day. Ribbon kol ha'olamim, master of all words, not upon our merit do we rely in pleading before you, but upon your great compassion. What are we? What is our life, our goodness, our righteousness, our achievement, our power, our victories? What can we say in your presence? Right? Heroes count as nothing before you. The famous are like they've never been. The wise seem ignorant, the clever lacking reason. The sum of our deeds is chaos, and our lives seem futile. Human beings have no superiority over beasts. All is vanity. So what is this? This is the human condition at times. I feel helpless, powerless. What does my work amount to? Life seems to be 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Wisdom? What do you mean, wisdom? Right? Power, heroes, nothing lasts. I feel ineffectual. The human condition feels ineffectual. But then the prayer goes on. And look what it says. Surely, though we are your people, partners to your covenant, descendants of Abraham who loved you, right? The seed of Isaac, the congregation of Jacob, your firstborn, whom you renamed Israel and Yeshurun because of the love you bore him and the delight he gave you. What is this about? Yes, the human condition causes us to feel powerless and helpless. Aval, but, and. All that is true, and we are not alone. We are covenantal partners of God. We stand in a long line of people who risked hope, who risked belief, who risked caring and striving to make a difference. I can too. After all, I'm the heir to a great tradition. I have what to be grateful for, and I have work to do in the world, and apparently the means to do it. And that prayer then leads to, on the next page, therefore it is our duty to thank. How blessed are we, an expression of gratitude. Why are we grateful? Because every day we get to say the Shema. That's what the liturgy suggests. Okay, so that's one tension, contradiction, like the conflicting feelings, the paradox at the heart of the human condition. And holding that paradox gives me more resilience. I don't deny my powerlessness. I don't deny the crisis of meaning. What is our life? I hold it as a both and. And with that crisis of meaning, I am in a covenantal relationship with God. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I just want to talk briefly about Adon Olam. Sorry, I have to move this down to get to the next tab. It's not letting me. There we go. I'm sorry, all right, you know what, I'll do it this way. Okay, can you see that, Adon Olam? Slide it over. There we go. Okay, so Adon Olam. Adon Olam is basically, it's a beautiful poem. It's gorgeous, and it's fundamentally in two parts. The first 6 lines of the poem envision the inaccessible, eternal, transcendent, distant God. God who was here before the world was created and will be here after. God who is out of reach, beyond, unconnectable, unique, like nothing we know, all powerful, all of that, right? Beyond anything. And then the second half of the poem, the last 4 lines, beginning with, in the English we translated, but still, God is then presented as the absolute, intimate, present, relatable God who is right here, about whom I can say, Eli, my God, the rock on whom I can rely in times of distress. And the last couple lines, Be'ado Kidruchi, I place my soul, my spirit, my emotions in God's hand when I lie down and when I arise, and along with my soul, my body, Adonai li velo ira. God is with me, I have no fear. Now, these are 2 radically different visions of the divine that coexist in the same poem. Just like we had 2 radically different visions of humanity in the earlier piece of liturgy, I am nothing, my life is meaningless, and I stand in covenantal relationship with God. Here, it's about God. God is distant and inaccessible, far away, grand, eternal. And God is intimate and present and right here next to me. Now, I want to suggest that both of those things, the tension, are really essential to resilience. Sometimes I need one, and sometimes I need the other. And to some extent, I can't have one without the other. I need to know that there is a sense of intimacy, that God is here. But what good is a God who is small enough to be next to me unless that God is also eternal and beyond me? If I make God too small, it's not a God I can turn to for help. On the other hand, I need to know that God is vast and eternal, that there is something. I remember feeling this right after 9/11. I went down to the beach and looked up at the stars and just feeling the vastness and feeling there is something bigger than humanity that we cannot ruin, that we can't touch. There's something bigger. That's it. That I need that. But if God is only that bigger and I can't connect, then how does that help me? This little poem that we chant like lightly while we're taking off our talit at the end of the service contains both of those visions, and allows us either to choose one or the other that we may need at any given time, or hold both at once and sort of surrender. And resting on that, face the day. So I'm going to stop here, and I know we want to stick to time, and I don't want to violate anybody's sense of time, but I'm happy to hang out for a little while longer if anyone has a few questions that we didn't get to, and I'll say goodnight to anyone who, I know it's late, at least on the East Coast. It's a little bit late in the evening. So thank you for your attention and for being here, and wishing you both a meaningful Yom HaZikaron and a joyful Yom HaAtzmaut beginning tomorrow night.
There's a lot of thank yous in the chat, and I want to echo them. What I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to say what I normally say at the end, and then we'll look at some of the questions in the chat for those who can stick around. So for those of you who are able to be here, thank you so much for being here. What a beautiful thing it is when the Jewish people come together to learn Torah. And my dear thanks to Rabbi Uhrbach for her. I don't know about y'all, I was taking notes the whole time, just pearls of wisdom and of heartfelt help in prayer lives, and a lot of appreciation for that. We will be meeting again next week, same for our next session in the series on prayer. And for those of you who can stick around, we're going to ask a couple more questions of Rabbi Uhrbach. So Phyllis is wondering about how one prevents the liturgy from becoming route instead of being meaningful. I think the word keva might be important here.
Yeah, so this is always a challenge, right? How to keep it's the counterpoint to the question before about, what if the Hebrew isn't accessible? The danger is what happens when it becomes too accessible and you start going on autopilot. It's what we call the curse of fluency. And I do think that it's really important to shake it up periodically. There are lots of very specific strategies that I can suggest. One of which, for example, is use a different siddur now and then. It will wake you up, and especially one with if you're used to davening with an Ashkenazi siddur and it's getting rote, pick up a Sephardi one, because the liturgy is a little different, and you'll stumble, and you'll have to really pay attention to what you're saying, just because what's on the page will look different, or it'll be laid out differently, and will help you pay attention more. But I also, less kind of on the tricks we can use. partly it's about devoting the time and really taking the time to prepare to pray. Sometimes I like to read something inspiring before I get up to pray. Read a little bit of Abraham Joshua Heschel, or I read something by Zalman Schachter Shalomi on prayer. Something that's going to remind me before I do it. Oh yeah, why am I doing this? And help me connect that way. And sometimes just slowing it down and really focusing on every word that you're saying in Hebrew or English, but just dwelling on a word, letting it sit for a minute can revitalize and keep it from being rote. On a daily basis, it's hard. And I don't want to underestimate the challenges of having a rich prayer life. It is really hard. And inevitably, sometimes you're going to go on autopilot and it's going to become rote. And, it's like driving, you'll realize, oh, I just prayed, 10 pages and I have no recollection of even doing it. Like, I know I did it. I said the words, I turned the pages, but I don't even really remember it. Like, I just drove 5 miles and I was paying attention enough not to crash, but like my mind was elsewhere. So it requires really just coming back and just returning one's attention to what one is doing. The third thing I'd suggest is reading some commentaries, because sometimes you read a commentary and you realize, oh, the prayer might mean something very different. And the last suggestion is find a chavruta. Find someone who is willing to talk about prayer with you. And go through the liturgy. It doesn't matter, in Hebrew or English. And talk with a friend about what it means to you, how you understand it. You may discover that your friend understands a particular prayer completely differently than you did, and it opens up a new meaning. Or what might happen is the next time you encounter that prayer, you will feel the love for your friend. And that will enrich your prayer life, because you'll bring that relationship into what you do. It's a wonderful thing to just a half hour a week, 10 minutes every other day, just pick a little piece of liturgy and talk to someone about it. So those are just a few suggestions. Any other?
It reminds me of something you taught the rabbinical school, Rabbi Uhrbach, where you said, why are High Holy Day services so long? Well, because these kinds of things take time. They're long because it takes time to do this, and it should take time to do this.
Right.
That's stuck with me. You said that almost a year ago. Steve and Joe are curious about how we reclaim our prayer communities from Zoom.
I mean, that's a complicated question on a number of levels, because it's so community dependent. It's very specific, depending on the needs of the particular community and what Zoom has, what moving to virtual prayer has, the challenges it's created, and also the opportunities and benefits it's created, and that very much varies from community to community. And there are a lot of things one could mean by that question, right? Which is like, how do we get people to come back to in-person services when it's actually quite comfortable to stay home and pray, and people want to, like being in their pajamas and not having to get dressed and go out? Or it could mean, how do we rebuild a community where people have kind of fallen away, and prayer does need constant attention. If you stop doing it for a while, it's hard to come back. If you stop going to shul, it's hard to come back. So one thing I want to say, and I think this is really important to the prayer enterprise, is that in the need to go back, which I do think has to happen, it's important not to leave behind the people for whom prayer on Zoom is a lifesaver, and who can only meaningfully access communal prayer remotely. I think it is to the shame of the Jewish community that we didn't notice that enough or take it seriously enough in most communities until COVID hit. And that's, I hope, one of the lessons that we've learned from COVID that we won't lose, is that there's an access issue here that is really important and needs to continue to be met. And I want to acknowledge that for some people, remote prayer on Zoom has been devastating to their prayer lives and really hard. And for others, it's actually been really helpful in a variety of ways. And the best advice I can offer that would be general advice, that wouldn't be community specific, is the kind of honesty that we want to bring to our prayer lives. We should bring to communal discussions about this. We need to start talking about it honestly, about why it's important to come in person and why some people may actually need to stay home. And we need to have these conversations without judgment about how we participate and how we show up, and prayer very much being a team sport, because it is. We need each other to sustain our prayer lives, but we need everybody, and how to manage that. I don't know any better solution other than really honest discussion in which we are all willing to recognize that this is a delicate thing. Prayer is a delicate thing. Prayer communities are delicate, and we all need to approach it with great generosity of spirit and care for each other. And that may mean that our own needs aren't always met. And hopefully we find a solution in which everybody's needs get met sometimes and everybody compromises sometimes, and together we move forward. But the details of the practical is so community specific. It really is. So I'm gonna save that for another day.
Well, in a I think a first for ScholarStream, we have actually asked every single question that was submitted.
Fantastic.
And so I want to thank you again, Rabbi Uhrbach. This was really special. And on behalf of all the folks here who have been messaging me and maybe even messaging you about how much they enjoyed it, thank you so very much for being with us here this evening. And I hope everybody here gets home safe and is inspired in their prayer lives from this session and the upcoming sessions in our series. All right, folks, have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.